So I wanted to start by just asking you about this weekend. It's a program, about rewilding. So I'm very curious. What is rewilding?
That's a great question. And the first thing that comes to me is so often we think of the word, well, I'll ask you, when you hear the word wild, what do you think of?
Wild? Okay, wild. I mean, I've never considered that before. Like wild is wild, right? Like crazy comes to mind, but it's not crazy. It's just, it's free, it's open, boisterous. Yeah. Nature. Natural.
Yes.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Anything else?
Nah, that's good for now.
Yeah, and all of that, absolutely wild. And here's the and. The way that, for example, all of these trees outside right now are changing their clothes for the season. And they're growing right before our eyes. We can't see it, but it's happening. The way that a lightning bug lights up half of its body to communicate with the other lightning bugs. And the way that a spider, right, like what they weave overnight. And there's no instructions. And all of these things, they're silent, right? And a lot of these things also are slow, right? And they'll go unnoticed if we don't have the courage to pause and pay attention. And that's such an act of rebellion in the society that we live in, to pause and to notice. And yeah, and also like think of the spider and the trees, right? Like this is consciousness as well. It's not something that we read about in a book or learn in school. It's this deep knowing that lives inside of all of us, right? Like even our breath, right? Like yes, there's pranayama practices that, we can guide each other through different ways of breathing. But, we go to sleep every single night trusting that our breath is going to continue. Our heartbeat is another reminder, right? These quiet miracles that are seeking no attention. And this too is wild, right? So this weekend, my intention is to offer invitations through journaling, through asana, through discussion, through different exercises, both together in community and also, I like to call it play work to take with you. I'll be taking us into the woods as well. I heard you say nature, right? This incredible teacher always of what is true and what is wild. And offering different tools that people can, if it resonates with them, take and put in their own toolboxes to take with them. Yeah.
So what's the aspect, rewilding?
Good question. So we're born singing, we're born breathing, right? And I'm watching, I heard you say you have a 1-year-old, right? And I watch my 2.5-year-old niece. And the way that she knows, right? And even like these basic things like hunger or thirst, right? We get so bombarded with distractions, whether it is our device, whether it is our to-do list, whether it is plans. And that's not always a bad thing too. I want to be very clear about that. So over the years, there are these layers upon layers upon layers that build, that not take us away from, but maybe we forget, right? What's here, this internal compass, this ability to know. So it's not something that we seek outside of ourselves, right? Sometimes by going outside, it helps us to reconnect with this remembering, right? Rewilding, remembering, reclaiming. Yeah, it's not something that doesn't already exist inside of us. So it's tapping back into that.
So do you notice for yourself that there's a process that happens where Yeah, it's hard to put to words, really, like some of what we're talking about, but there's like a movement away from this natural, wild, knowing part of yourself connected to maybe being a child and what you notice in them. So there's like a movement away from that, and then maybe you bring yourself back, sounds like, right? Or maybe many of us do this, but I'm curious, like, is this a practice that you have, kind of bringing yourself back?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I would say absolutely, right? I think of playing the guitar, for example. You know, we want to learn a song, and what do we need to do in order to learn that song, right? Pick up the guitar over and over again. So yes, this absolutely is a practice to get back in touch with what it is that we already know. So for example, there's an exercise that I will return to every day inside of myself, where essentially tuning into what feels like a yes to my body, what feels this like open, expansive feeling, this warm, inclusive feeling, and then what feels like a no, this more contracting feeling, this shrinking kind of feeling, constriction. And so even playing with this yes and this no, maybe, you know, I can't decide what to have for dinner, right? So give myself a couple of different options, and maybe I don't know whether I want to take a nap or go for a walk, right? So practice by playing also, right? We forget the importance of play. And I mean, you look at kids as well, going back to that childhood knowing, and so much of what they learn is through play. And yes, absolutely practice every single day. You know, maybe that also could look like part of how you start your day. Every single day, I go outside without a device for minimum 1 hour, right? So that is also part of this practice before I'm bombarded with screens and messaging and responding, which is a blessing in and of itself too, right? But from that place of remembering, from that place of being attuned to my own self and my own center and my own knowing.
Do you think it's all play?
That's such a good question. I think it could be.
Yeah, it might be as simple as a choice.
Right, exactly. I think it's easy to forget and take life maybe a little bit too seriously. But yeah, what if it was all play?
Right. I'm curious, like for you, like, is there anything that happens, a change that happens if you like remember that or see? Do you ever view life like that? I don't know, like oh, I'm just this character that I'm moving about.
Sure. Oh my gosh, yes, absolutely, yeah. Whenever I'm like in a group of people and there's kids, I usually gravitate towards the kids because I just feel like they're so much easier to understand, and let's go play. I was at my neighbor's house the other day, and I think he's 4 years old. He showed up with a hula hoop and he was like, "We're gonna play a game." I was like, "Okay, bye," you know. Yeah, I feel that that's another remembering too. You know, I haven't met many human beings that weren't kids at some point, right? So we all know how to do this. I mean, like, think back to maybe like playing make believe, right? Whether it was we were pretending to be a yoga instructor or an astronaut or, you know, whatever it was. Right, we all know how to use our imaginations and to play, and life feels a little bit more fun when we approach it from that way. Yeah,
I wonder if it's worth investigating how that changed. Right, like the play was there as a child, like the interest was totally just to be playing all the time, and then at some point that went away. That shifted. And then now there might be interest in getting back. So in order to get back, maybe I need to understand what happened there to begin with.
Yeah, and I imagine that is probably different for every single person. And also want to name too that could involve trauma for some people too. So providing a very safe, gentle, and nurturing space to explore where that shift may have happened and why that shift may have happened, and make it a safe space, and make it an invitational space to explore once again. Yeah.
You know, you mentioned, I think, the courage to slow down, right? And I love that. And it's really interesting too that you combine courage with that, because I think it does take courage. You know, and it's almost as if the speed. I think the speed is like a really important consideration, and might be actually what's between me and that freedom, that wild, playful place. And so it might be less about the actual stuff and more about, I started to operate really fast so that I did it, because in a way, maybe I'm afraid of reality, of really seeing what's there.
Yeah.
And so the distraction maybe keeps me safe, or an illusion of safety, from really taking the time to see what's here.
Absolutely. Yes. I agree 1000%. It truly takes courage to pause in the midst of a world that's begging for us to be distracted. Because when we pause, we see what's here. And maybe that's uncomfortable, right? Maybe it's really beautiful. Maybe it's the truth of what we've been ignoring for a good portion of our life. And we start thinking, well, what if it's too late, right? And then, going to use nature as an example once more, is always showing us that it's right on time. You know, you don't see these trees like asking permission for, or like which color their leaves should turn, or when, you know, which month. Nature's just going to be nature, right? And also speaking to the speed, right? Looking at nature and things that happen quickly, right? Thinking of, well, I'll ask you again, what do you, like when you think of things that happen quickly in nature, what do you think of? What comes to mind?
First thing that came to mind was a river. I mean, to be honest, I actually don't like to separate human from nature.
I'm right there with you.
So humans come to mind.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. Yeah, we are absolutely one, and this is intrinsically connected, right? So when nature moves quickly, like thinking of and humans, right? Both. You're already like picking up what I'm putting down. So when nature moves quickly, things like rivers rushing, like rapids, or maybe lightning striking, or an eruption, or a tsunami, or a hurricane, right? So these things that happen quickly, what does it cause?
Yeah, I don't know if it's every time, but damage comes to mind.
And sometimes it's necessary, you know, like sometimes wildfires, for example, that aren't created like by humans, you know, like sometimes it is necessary in order for rebuilding. Absolutely. And there is destruction before the rebuilding process, you know, and then we think of things in nature that happen slowly, like thinking of the trees growing outside and the farm down by the road and fields of wildflowers. You know, it takes time, and these are the things that are sustained over, you know, I live in Appalachia, and these are some of the oldest mountains on planet Earth, you know, and just the millions of years that it took for those mountains to form, and they are still standing, you know, despite everything. So yeah, exactly what you're saying. We are not separate from nature. So what happens when we slow down, right? What happens when we open towards that which is asking to give us life, just like the trees know how to grow towards the sun, right? And then what happens when we don't give ourselves permission to ever slow down, right? And sometimes it's also, as humans, I don't know about you, but some of the biggest wake-up calls have happened for me when I refused to slow down and I didn't listen to my body. And maybe I landed in the hospital, right? Like, that definitely elicited a change, right? Sometimes necessary.
Yeah. I know that you're very passionate about meditation, I think, and lead a lot of guided meditations. And it's occurring to me when we're talking about this that so much of this has to do with the mind. Like, it's the speed is, I think, most of the time happening in the mind. And so there's the power of meditation of, what I do is I tell my mind, you have permission to rest. And when I lead guided meditations, I often say that and say, give the mind permission to rest, or the mind is working so hard all the time, right? So first, like, give the mind a pat on the back, like, good job, you're working for me all the time, having opinions, figuring things out, for a few minutes. You don't need to have an opinion about anything. And I think what you're getting at is, like, something happens there. There's something, like, when I actually do that, slow down, rest the mind, there's something happening there. Maybe growth comes to mind, but it's very important, I think.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm curious, do you have a daily meditation practice? What does that look like for you?
Well, every morning I do my pranayama and then right into meditation. So it's silent meditation with myself,
Yeah. Beautiful practice, yeah. And I feel like a lot of people who don't have an established practice, like yourself, they hear meditation and they think that it needs to look a certain way and be a certain amount of time. And I feel that that's also something that we do as humans, right? We forget the importance of, my mom reminds me often, she says, little by little, again and again. Little by little, again and again, right? So people who might be showing up for an experience like this weekend also, maybe they have an established practice, maybe they don't, right? And I want to make very clear that my own practice started years ago because of a teacher. Well, okay, that's a whole nother story. But it started with like 30 seconds, literally, and building from there. You don't see an acorn and then overnight it becomes an oak tree.
Right, but really I think what you're talking about is this tendency to judge the self. And that can show up in meditation as much as anywhere else. Like, I'm not good at this. I'm not doing this right. I'm not doing it for long enough. Like, all this stuff, to me, that's the obstacle. The obstacle of experiencing what really my heart, my being wants to experience is this taking myself, this personality, very seriously. That's what's getting in the way.
Absolutely. And there's a word that you said that is so impactful every time I hear it, and that word was permission, right? When you were talking about giving your mind, hey, buddy, you're working so hard. You have permission to just take a break, right? And that makes me think too of how we as humans in this permission, we're the only beings on this planet that don't give ourselves permission to be exactly what we are, right? We are the only beings on this planet that try to convince ourselves that we need to be something that we're not.
This is such a good point that I think really deserves a lot of investigation, actually, what you're saying here. We're the only beings that do not give ourselves permission to essentially just be.
Yeah. We're the only beings on this planet that try to convince ourselves to be something that we already are. You don't see a tree trying to be a mountain, right? You don't see a rock trying to fly, right? You don't see a cat trying to be a hippopotamus, right? Like, and on top of that, shaming themselves and feeling guilt because they're not.
So I'm very interested in why this is happening for humans. And yeah, we were talking before we started about community. And community means so much to me, right? Like, and I think we're living in community whether or not we want to be. Like, we just are in community. I also think that there's a shadow side to community, right? That's connected to what we're talking about right now. And it doesn't have to be this way. It depends on what the community is like. So the community itself can be promoting what you're talking about, this remembering, this knowing of, I am what I am, and I'm going to be what I am, and how could I ever even conceive of anything different, right? But a community could also be, you need to prove something. You need to compare yourself with other people. And that is the force, I think, that actually allows that to happen, that which is really unnatural.
Right.
Because we want to belong. So out of this desire to belong, I'm going to give away this experience of knowing that I don't need to prove anything to anyone.
Yeah. And that's a big thing to give up. There's a theory that changed, I mean, these are big words, but changed my life, that I learned years ago from one of my mentors. And it comes from a psychologist by the name of Robert Bly. Have you heard of Robert Bly? He has a theory of the loyal soldier and the long black bag. And essentially what you're sharing with, we will do anything within our power to belong, because our hindbrain is telling us if we don't, we're going to get eaten by a saber-toothed tiger, right? So that makes so much sense. And in this theory, he talks about, it starts, I mean, very young, like, you know, even before we have memories, even perhaps. And for example, maybe little 4-year-old Johnny is parading around the kitchen naked, and caregiver says, "Hey Johnny, it's time to go to the grocery store, get in the car." So caregiver goes to get in the car and just like trusts Johnny's coming to the car, and looks in the back seat of the car, and Johnny's sitting there naked, right, ready to go to the grocery store. And caregiver says, "Oh my gosh, Johnny, we do not leave the house naked. Don't ever do that again." So in that moment, Johnny learns, never be my free wild self outside of these walls ever again, and puts that in the bag, right? And so then fast forward to adolescence, where if we're not liked by our peers, we might as well be a goner, right? So what do? You know, we alter our physical state. We alter the way that we speak. We alter the way that we present our face, right? And so authenticity in the bag, right? And just by the time we reach maybe our late 20s, early 30s, maybe mid 30s, like we're carrying around this long, black, heavy, laden bag that we've just filled with putting pieces and parts of ourselves in that we're hiding so that we are chosen, so that we belong, right? Because when we were cave humans, if we didn't, we were in pretty big trouble. So then you start getting curious. Why does this feel so heavy, right? And then we have a choice. I remember you saying this word before. We have a choice. We can take a look at what we've been carrying around for so much of our lives, and pieces and parts of ourselves that we've stuffed away, right? That are intrinsically connected with the truth of ourselves, right? So there might be some shame around that. There might be some feeling of it's too late, right? But it's never too late, right? We are right on time. And I feel there's an importance with timing as well. You know, think of a butterfly that is, well, before it's a butterfly, right? It becomes bug soup after the caterpillar goes in the chrysalis. And if anything or anyone were to try to break that open before the butterfly is ready, it's going to be a goner, right? So just we as humans, we arrive at a point of being ready for something exactly when we're meant to. And it's because of every decision that was made and every choice that was taken before that made us ready, that got us to that point of being right on time.
Yeah, I think this last point that you're bringing up is extremely important. It makes me think of acceptance, right? Like, because I can see this big black bag, I like the analogy, right, that I've been carrying around, and how heavy it is.
Right.
And I can have a glimpse of the possibilities, right, and the freedom. But what you said about, and your mom, I think, like a little bit, for a little bit, right? Like that's okay, like to start there a little bit. But I wonder if the little bit will even happen if I don't allow it to be okay that I have this heavy bag. If I am ashamed of this bag that I've been carrying around, then I'm not going to be able to make any progress, even the little bit.
Right. Yeah. I hear you. And what I thought of when you said this big heavy bag of all these things that were at one time very much alive and have become this very heavy thing is compost. Right? Think of these things
Nice.
that were so alive at one point, and now all of this that you experienced, whatever it is, right? This is what is going to inform the future version of you, and that is the most powerful compost.
That's even good. That's even better than acceptance. That's like purpose.
Yeah.
This can be used.
Both.
And it's true.
Both, yeah, acceptance and purpose.
Both,
Yeah.
exactly.
Thank you, every past version of myself that behaved the way that I did to bring me that much closer to the truth of myself.
And I wonder if this ability to slow down and be and see reality, if one of the things that it might be common to see if we do this is that this situation that we're in is pretty unbelievable. It's pretty incredible. My experience is that that's objective reality. It's challenging, there's pain, there's suffering, for sure. There's a lot of dark things, but it is incredible. And it feels appropriate for me to be grateful that I'm having this experience at all. That's the message when I started the practice of really stopping, slowing down and meditating. I wasn't expecting it, but this gratitude just came. And the gratitude itself, I think, is an incredible, I don't know if fuel's the right word, but towards growth and allowing for, like if I'm grateful for this experience that I'm having, then I can work with whatever's here,
Yeah, absolutely. And a word that comes to me when you say that, that was a beautiful share, is praise, right? And when we put ourselves in the way of that which brings us joy, right? Praise and also presence, right? Like how can we feel that sense of gratitude in the midst of everything that being a human entails, right? Sometimes it's really fun, sometimes it's really not, like the pendulum doesn't just swing in one direction. But yeah, that unshakable presence that comes with practices like meditation, right? And the gratitude that can be felt. I mean, even if you're having a bad day, like go talk to a flower and tell it how beautiful it is and try to be in a bad mood, right? Yeah. Presence and praise.
Yeah, I think you're really on it with the speed. honestly. Like, that's so important, but it does take courage. Change takes courage.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah.
To change how I'm operating internally, that takes courage. Because it's comfortable. The speed that I'm operating at,
right.
Go, 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 that's comfortable. So to stop that, something needs to come through that's strong enough to stop that.
Yeah. Yeah, and that could be for generations that it's, been go, 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 go. It's not just in your lifetime, so that's rewiring not only your own brain and your own nervous system, but, probably a lot more years than you even know. And, and I feel you personally, too. My baseline energy is pretty high. So this this practice of slowing down and of noticing, and also takes me back to the play when I am energetic, not feeling guilty about it or like I need to quiet myself, like letting myself have fun and be sparkly, and it's both of it, right? And there's another word that comes to me now is intention, right? So like when I am moving slowly, what is my intention? When I am picking up the pace, what is my intention? And is this life-giving, or is this something that's just going to taste good for a few minutes? Is this something that's going to support the version of myself that I desire to be? Does that make sense?
Yeah, of course. There's always that play, or there's often that play between, this is like almost a law of nature, I feel like, the short-term gratification versus the long-term health.
Yep. Yeah, exactly. The same mentors I was talking about before gave me a check-in that also continues to be so helpful. And it's holding something and being with it, pausing with it, and asking myself, okay, is this life-giving, or is this seductive? And not seductive in like a sexual way, but like, is this like a shiny sparkle? Like, this is just gonna serve me for a second, but actually take me away from how it is that I want to feel in my baseline every day? Or is this something that's more life-giving? Yeah, that's going to serve me, and that's going to serve what's beyond me as well. Yeah.
I've been thinking a lot about time recently. And that's at play here too, because the time now can be very short, right? Where I'm enjoying that cookie, whatever it is, But then the amount of time where maybe I'm not going to feel so good afterwards,
right,
could be longer. So, but then there's the power of the present moment, which isn't really concerned very much about the future.
Right, absolutely.
So it's almost like this relationship between my present self and my future self. And what's that like? Like, does my present self have the back of my future self?
Yeah, what is my future self going to thank right now me for? Totally. And I love that you used cookie too. Like, that's not necessarily going to be like a seductive thing. Maybe it's like, in the past, I've just mindlessly eaten cookies, and I am going to savor this cookie and experience this cookie, right? Is it going to make me feel as good as eating an apple? I don't know, right? But yeah, and that takes me back to this word intention. What is my intention behind eating the cookie?
Yeah. And if the intention is just to have some pleasure,
yeah,
that's okay too, I think.
That's very life-giving.
Yeah.
That's something that we as humans also, depends on the human, and there are a lot of humans that don't give themselves permission to experience pleasure. And so much of that is rooted in the present moment. I don't know about you, but every single time I drive home and I see the mountains, and sometimes I'm brought to tears, right? Like, the pleasure that I am overcome with in knowing this is my home, right? And I wouldn't experience that if I wasn't being present with what was right in front of my face, right?
And luckily, thankfully, I think being present is very pleasurable.
Oh, agreed.
You know, in our world, in the yoga world,
Yeah.
I don't know, that might be overlooked sometimes, right? Like we
Yeah.
can be honest about that. Like it's okay to have an interest in being present because it feels really good to be
Right.
present.
Right. Yeah.
It
Absolutely.
feels much better than to not be.
Even when life is hard, like even if you're going through something really scary, right? Like there's still, I don't know if pleasure is the right word, but maybe gratitude to be found in those moments of presence as well.
Yeah. I think it is. I'm curious what you like. When I'm in meditation and I am really slowed down, where there are no thoughts, even if it's for a short period of time, that is blissful. I know that experience is blissful.
Yeah, I agreed. I mean, the morning time, the way that I start my days, and that minimum of 1 hour outside device free is one of the most important parts of my entire day. And I can be going through some really challenging life stuff, and still that time outside is my solace. It is my sanctuary. And I truly believe it's because I'm fully present. I'm not distracted with something in my ears or in my hand. Like, I am here. And my mind can wander, and that's kind of the fun part too. Where's it going to go this morning?
Right? Yeah, there's a power in that structure, creating that structure for yourself too. Like, it's not even a question.
Yeah.
This is what I'm doing for an hour in the morning.
Right.
Yeah. It's interesting because there's this play between kind of the spontaneous treasures found and the ongoing practice sadhana structure
Yeah.
that I have. And I get like that joy of discovery is phenomenal. To discover something new. Like whenever you discovered this, that like this works for me to be outside for an hour. Like that was
Yeah.
discovered
Yes.
at some point. At one day that was new. And it could have just been one day, but you chose to make it into something more than that.
Yeah, a word that's coming to me hearing you say that is devotion, right? And I feel like we can be disciplined and we can be devoted, right? And not one is better than the other, right? But when we're disciplined, I think more. Well, I'll ask you again. What do you think of when you hear the word discipline? What kind of energy is behind that?
It's funny, I really like discipline.
Yeah, same.
But at the same time, there is some negativity that is present in that word, like a harshness.
Yeah, maybe more like rigidity.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then what about devotion? What comes to you when you hear the word devotion?
Just love, connection with something higher, appreciation.
Yeah, absolutely. So when we infuse these practices with discipline and devotion, right? Again, what is my intention behind this, right? The discipline is helping us to continue to show up for these practices. And why am I showing up from these practices, right? They're rooted in love. They create this foundation for my days so that I can show up in this way. It makes me think of like a boundary, right? Like this is me creating a healthy boundary with myself. This is non-negotiable time that I'm going to take in the morning, and I am going to claim this space for myself, right? And there's a difference between a wall and a boundary, right? Like if I'm leading a retreat in the African bush, I'm definitely not going to go off for an hour by myself in the morning because I want to live, right? So this is a healthy boundary. I know this is going to serve me, so that and because of that, I am going to remain devoted to this boundary, which takes discipline.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, there's something really comforting in that.
Mm-hmm. Right. And why do we go back to these places of stillness, of awareness? You know, when I'm outside, I am moving, right? However we tap into that presence, right? And how that reconnects us with that internal compass, right? Bringing it back to the wild, right? Mm. I don't know about you, but when I'm outside in the morning and I'm not distracted with anything, and there's bears run around my neighborhood like squirrels, right? Like every leaf that I hear, like tree branch, my senses are so much more enlivened as well, right? And that is wild, right? This is how we were made. David White is are you familiar? Feeling you might be. Poetry is definitely a love language of mine, and he says to be courageous is to remain close to the way that we were made. Mm. Mm. Yeah. I wonder what play words have with that. Like, to remain close to the way I was made, is there language there? You know? Like, in that deepest place, I don't think there is language, actually. Language is fun and it's great, but I also want to remember that it's engaging in it takes me a little, like one step even, at least, from that place. Yeah. That which is ineffable, right? No words. It can only be felt. It can only be experienced.
I like that you ask questions about what comes to you when you hear a certain word. Because I think it's extremely important to understand that, as far as I can tell, each of us have a unique relationship with words. And often when we communicate with each other, we pretend as if that's not the case. Right? Like, we pretend that, like, your understanding of compassion is the same as my understanding of compassion, and it's not. It never is.
Right.
Exactly the same.
Yeah. And in the language that we speak, I mean, there are so many others too.
Right.
Right?
So it's like, just to be honest about that, I think then can allow for better communication.
Yeah, agreed. 1000%.
You know, I want to go back to something you mentioned regarding generations, right? And like feeling that maybe tendencies, ways of being have been passed down, are a part of something that's larger than simply the time of my life. Is that your experience? Like that you now are, in a way I kind of look at it like this sometimes, like it's it's like a relay race, and there's a baton being passed.
Yeah.
You know, every generation passes the baton onto it. So right now, perhaps, we're the ones with the baton, and at some point we'll be giving the baton to someone else.
Yeah, and how do we want that to look? And are we realizing also that maybe this is a baton that I don't want to pass, right? And going back to the idea of this internal wild and this internal knowing. And so these are well-worn grooves that are passed down from generation to generation. And I'm also want to say, this is my experience. I don't have all the answers, right? I'm not saying this is how it is. However, my experience in being of witness to these well-worn grooves and getting that much more in touch with my own internal compass, what feels yes, what feels expansive, warm, loving, what feels no, constrictive, contracting, right? When I am of witness to these generational habits and patterns, I have noticed how my body responds, right? And there have been certain situations and scenarios where I might be in a group setting with family and my body responds a certain way, right? Maybe it is that warm, expansive feeling. Maybe it is more that constrictive, contracting feeling. And then this is information for me. Is this something that I want to contribute in perpetuating? Or is this something that I want to contribute in evolving, right? And doing a new way and giving this energy a new job, right? And that's not easy, especially if it's generations, and I'm very fortunate to come from a family that we can have these conversations from open-minded acceptance. It's not easy, it definitely shakes things up. However, if we as humans ignore that feeling of, okay, this doesn't feel right to me, but I'm going to keep doing this anyways. This is passing the baton of something that doesn't feel right. If this is something that's feeling really rooted and warm and expansive to me, this is passing the baton of something that I do want to perpetuate forward. And this is also something that we get to choose. And it takes a whole lot of courage when it's something that's been going on for generations that doesn't feel right to us anymore. A lot of courage.
Yeah. Yeah.
Did that answer your question?
Yeah, I mean, a lot of courage to simply be honest with myself about what's happening right now.
Yeah.
What is here right now? Because I think that awareness, I believe that awareness of what is the curiosity, and then the awareness of what is happening presently, that is making progress of sorts.
Absolutely.
I don't even need to figure it out more than that. I can just trust in the awareness itself.
Yes, and a word that you just said, curiosity, right? Something that I have noticed is when there is a curiosity that just will not leave me alone, this is something to pay attention to. And it's a going deeper than words kind of thing. It's like, okay, I still hear you here. I still feel you. Like, where are you coming from? And it's deeper than words. It goes far beyond words. But when there is an insatiable curiosity about something, pay attention.
Yeah. And hopefully I could say for myself, I think that I can't even help it, there's an insatiable curiosity about the truth. Right? Maybe we all have that, I don't know. But that's fun.
Isn't that fun, coming from these beings with opinions?
Right.
What is truth? Yeah.
Yeah. Well, yeah, and on a certain level, it doesn't matter if other people agree with me or not. Just to connect with what I feel is true is enough.
Yeah.
That's plenty.
Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah, and to be in a community, also bringing it back to community. There's, are you familiar with Mark Nepo and his writings? Yeah. He says, may we share the evidence of our journeys and not our conclusions. And when we can glean clarity on what it is our journey has been, is now, and continues to be, and when we can share that openly from a place of not needing to please or convince anyone, I feel like that has a little bit something to do with truth.
Definitely. Yeah, there's even an effectiveness of that. But going back to community again, I'd love to hear, just to give a timetable, right? Helene happened, what, was it a month ago, 2 months ago?
Just about a month ago.
A month ago. And that's where you live, or you live in Asheville, right? And you said, I asked you what you learned from this experience, and you said community, right? The power of community.
Yes.
So, what have you learned about community?
Yeah, and the lessons have been multiple, and they continue to come. And yes, community just continues to show up, and I don't know where I'd be without my community. And community in Asheville and community beyond as well. And the way that even a literal hurricane can destroy multiple towns. And I mean, people who have lost everything, you know, they're still showing up and asking, what can I do? How can I contribute? How can I help you? And the intrinsic good that I have seen and been reminded of within people in Asheville and beyond as well, people just desiring to help. I mean, and to the point where I can send links and Venmo addresses, and I'm like, I pray. Like I just, I'm running out of ways to share, because I mean, people, just the outpouring of the desire to help and to lift up. And yeah, just, I mean, even myself and my own personal experience, when the storm hit, I was alone in my little, I call it my tree house where I live. And, at first I was like, I'll be fine, like I can get through this on my own. And then it didn't take very long until my best friend lives across the street. And then it feels weird to call them my landlords. They're like surrogate parents. And, we all just became this unit very quickly, So this, I'll be fine. I can get through this on my own very, very quickly changed. And like, no, this is not something to do alone. And so in the very microcosm of the event, just the way that, and as soon as we could go outside, people just coming out like, are you okay? Are you okay? Are you okay? And then we had the blackout, so we couldn't call, we couldn't text for a very long time. And just hundreds of messages that came in when service came back on too, just people wanting to help other people. And it continues. It's been, we're about a month out and we still have a long way to go with recovery. And I just had a dear friend, message me today with a beautiful song that she wrote about the storm, and following a message saying that myself and my friend want to come and do a benefit show somewhere. Like, where do you have any ideas? And it's just, continues. Community is also something that we get to choose, going back to choice. And this entire experience has only deepened my knowing, this wild knowing inside of me of why I chose those mountains and that community to be my home and part of my family. Because, this community is global as well. And goodness, I need it. Yeah.
Have you wondered at all about it perhaps being possible to tap into having this kind of experience with other people in community outside of an emergency situation?
Absolutely, yes. Yeah, and I see that and I feel that every time I come here. I see that and I feel that at Floyd Yoga Jam. I see that and feel that every time I'm honored to lead retreat. And I see that and I feel that in Asheville, outside of emergency situations too. Every time my parents come and visit, they're just like, wow, everyone is so nice here and so giving and just wants to make your day better. And yes, so I 1000% agree that can happen outside of emergency situations, yes. Yeah.
All right, thank you so much. I hope this weekend is very fruitful for you and all the participants, and I think it will be. I want to ask if people are interested in connecting you with more, finding out about what you're doing. What's the best way for them to do that?
Thank you so much for asking that question. So on the socials, Great Abiding Yoga. And if you add
Abiding Yoga.
Great Abiding Yoga, yes. So my grandmother, before we got off the phone or on birthday cards, she used to always sign with Great Abiding Love. So Great Abiding Yoga, that's where that came from.
Nice.
And if you add a .com to that, that's my website. And I have a newsletter that goes out monthly. So signing up for my newsletter which is on my website, is a really good way to stay in touch and up to date.
Do you teach online or just in person?
I do. I teach both, all of the above. Yes, I travel all over the world and lead retreat, and I teach. And some brave souls also call me their life coach. I do life coaching and both yoga online, and then I teach in Asheville as well in person, and all over the country at a handful of festivals. So, yeah.
What's it like being a life coach?
Oh my gosh, it's so much fun. It's so much freaking fun.
Yeah.
Like, I cannot even believe I get to call what I get to call work, my work. And it requires unshakable presence, because it's listening to the intonations of the voice. It's watching the body language. It's feeling for shifts of energy. And oh my goodness, I love it so much. Yeah.
I'm glad you found that, and you found us.
So grateful. Thank you for this conversation.
Om Shanti.
Appreciate
Thank you,
you.
Tara.
Om Shanti.
Thanks for listening. If you've enjoyed this content and think others might as well, please feel free to share and subscribe.